My name is Pam Rocker. I'm the director of Affirming, and we are based out of Southern Alberta. And we are so pleased to co-present this event, Everyone Gets a Slice, as part of National Affirming / Pi Day, which is coming up on March 14th. Yes, 3.14, pi. Some have accused us of oppressing math, but I checked in and math is still going strong. So we're okay. We are so pleased to bring this event to you. Our folks are also from across the country, so we're really glad to be able to bring you geographical perspectives as well. But actually, my colleague Miranda is going to lead the moderation of this amazing event tonight. Without further ado, take it over, Miranda.
Thanks, Pam. Yes, as Pam said, my name is Miranda Martini. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a project assistant with Affirming Connections, which is a very cool job that means that I sometimes get to moderate wonderful events like this one, which is really wonderful. So thank you all for joining us for Everyone Gets a Slice, and all of our truly brilliant panelists who I had a chance to chat with right before this. You're in for a treat. With Pi Day, National Affirming Day, this is a great time to reaffirm our commitment to the values of being affirming and what that really means in practicalities. And looking at the LGBTQIA2S+ acronym, which represents endless diversity of identities and expression. There are people and identities that often get left out or underserved in these discussions. So we've gathered together some expert folks to talk about these themes tonight, and I'll go ahead and introduce them briefly. We have Chris Cochran, who is a trans activist, educator, and public speaker, originally from Glace Bay, Northern Cape Breton, now based out of Chibuktuk, Halifax, colonially known. Chris works towards creating safe spaces for QTBI POC people, as well as working with 2S LGBTIQIA+ youth to ensure those spaces will be upheld for years to come. And then next, right below me on my screen, we have Reverend Andrea Brennan, who was ordained and ordered to the priesthood at St. Paul's Cathedral in London, Ontario, the same cathedral where she was baptized in 1968, fun fact there. And in 2016, she began her ministry at Christ Church Fernie in BC. So we're kind of place neighbors right now. A lifelong follower of Jesus and a queer advocate for equality, Andrea's theology is all about love and inclusion. And then cat-eye corner to me on the screen, we have Jolita Datas. Jolita was born in Haiti, raised in the Bahamas, and currently calls Treaty 6 territory home. As the co-founder of Ubuntu Mobilizing Central Alberta, which is a grassroots community organization, Jolita believes that community organizing should be people-led and people-centered. And last but certainly not least, we have Jamie ARPIN-RICCI, who is an author, activist, and a pastoral leader at Little Flowers Community, a Mennonite congregation in the core of Winnipeg. He works and writes at the intersection of faith, justice, and sexuality. And Jamie identifies as bisexual / pansexual / queer. Hello to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really a treat to hear from you, and I'm really excited to get into it. So maybe first up, in that order, maybe we'll start with you, Chris. If you want to, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, pronouns, location, a little taste of what you do, and something about yourself that you're proud of.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Cochran. I am in Halifax, so it is very late right now where I'm at. It's really dark right now, but I stayed up because I think this is important. So what I am a MAB trans woman, cis presenting. Now, what that means is that I was assigned male at birth, and I am now a trans woman. I have been transitioning now for the last 12 years. And part of my journey is my interconnection between being a Black person and also being a trans woman. So I am one of the first to do a lot of firsts here in Halifax. I was the first Black trans woman to be the head of the board for the Halifax Pride, still am. I was the first Black trans woman to speak in Parliament for Trans Awareness Day. And I also got a few things that now they have to put up a trans flag during TDOV and TDOR. So also what I do for my daily life is I work for 2S LGBT community youth group. It's called the Youth Group. And we work with 2S LGBT youth. I do transitioning. I help them with numbers about what papers they have to go to, just basically also counseling sessions one-on-one. And then also we do it with their parents and things like that. We offer programming. We have a summer camp, 2 summer camps, one for 2S LGBT youth and one for trans and non-binary youth. And we have monthly, weekly, and also bi-monthly programming for them. So that's what I do. I'm also the vice chair of Halifax Pride, and I'm an ex-Navy person, and oh my God, so many other things. I am sorry about all the acronyms. I know it's a lot. I love my acronyms, but I'm also a makeup artist and an esthetician, and an actress as well. People ask me, what is it the only thing I don't do? And that is sleep. So I don't sleep a lot. But my most work is with this. So I also work for I'm vice chair of Halifax Pride, and then I'm also an educator at 2 of the universities. So I'm a lecturer and speaker for those as well. I'm also campaigning to make sure that trans youth are going to have trans youth are taken care of. So therefore, it will be taught mandatorily for any medical professional. So that whether it be psychologists, medical doctors, or nurses. So that way, it's not just an and then. So it's a little bit about me. I'm an ex-Navy, and I'm also, I think one of my proudest moments has nothing to do with any of those achievements, as this is my 17th year of being a drag queen in Halifax. And I'm the only trans Black drag queen this side of Montreal. So I represent a lot. And I think my proudest moment is being able to take those 2 things and be a beacon. The story that I use all the time is I had a youth one time as I was doing a parade yell out, "I'm trans too." And after the parade, the mother came up to me and said that was the first time she ever said that she was trans outside of her family. So, and I keep in touch with her every day. She just got new highlights. She's in the cheerleading team. So that's why I do what I do. It's for those moments to realize, because I do it so that Christopher William Cochran, 11-year-old boy in Cape Breton, did not have anything to look towards and didn't know if they were the only one in the world. So that's what I do, and that's what I like to do, and I can't believe I get paid to do it. So it's a fantastic thing, and I think it was just meant for me. So
That's incredible. Oh, that anecdote gave me made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. That's so lovely. You should sleep. Sleep is important. I love sleep. Big sleep fan over here. Thanks, Chris. Andrea, over to you.
You're still muted, I think, Andrea.
Well, excellent. It was a fabulous start, and I won't be able to do it as well again, but here we go. My name is Andrea Brennan, and I have a geriatric cat that's trying to decide if he's going to attack me or not, so just be prepared. The sign over my shoulder is a little bit of Ash Wednesday humor. Remember, you are butt dust, not butt dust. And there is a story that goes with that. I am a priest in the Anglican Church, and I am a minister in the United Church. I came to Fernie driving across Canada at the end of January in 2016. Don't recommend it. I was with Christ Church, and then we were having conversations about congregations getting smaller, congregations getting older, we're running out of money. Do you want to work part-time doing something else? And I said, nope. Let's see what else we can do. So we had a conversation with Fernie Knox United Church, and they said, let's give this a shot. So we did. And we were about 2 months into our shared ministry. And then COVID hit. And a positive that's come out of COVID is that these two separate, disparate congregations have now come together and they worship together, even though we still have Anglican worship and United Church worship, although insidiously, I'm slowly bringing them together. So COVID's been the best thing that ever happened to our shared ministry, and I'm absolutely serious when I say that. I live and work and play on the unceded territory of the Tunaha peoples and the Métis Nation of the Elk Valley, and it is such a joy to do what I do. I tend to get a lot of the, shall we say, orphan funerals in the community. So people that have had a death in their family, and the funeral director thinks that they need someone to walk with them pastorally, but they're not a religious sort of person. So I get a phone call and I go to the funeral home and I sit down with them, and I have a mouth like a trucker. So I promise, Pam, I'll do my very best to watch my language, but I don't blaspheme, but I do drop the F-bomb every now and then. So on Wednesday, it was Ash Wednesday. And so I was dressed all in black. I had my clerical collar on, and I got a call about a woman who's just a few years older than me that died unexpectedly. And so I met with 12 people in her family, and I show up looking haggard. I almost always look haggard because, like Chris, sleep is an option. It's something that I really ought to do more and get better at, but not so good. And I had a thumbprint of ash in the middle of my forehead that all afternoon people in the community were going, I'm like, don't touch me. Anyway, so I show up at the funeral home, we have a conversation, and I'm able to get everybody into a much better place because they're pivoting between, I don't understand what just happened. I talked to her yesterday. Is there something I should have done? And all of the stuff that goes with that, and reminding them that the hurt that is experienced at that time is matched by the love that was shared. And you don't ever want that love to go away because you're not ready to stop loving the person. So you're going to balance that, and that there are helpful things to say and unhelpful things to say, and how to deal with the unhelpful things and to steer people towards the helpful things. And that's something that I'm really proud of, that whether it's for, I've done funerals now for atheists and Buddhists, and I think the only funeral that I haven't done is a Roman Catholic funeral, but I have assisted in two. One of my closest friends and allies is the Roman Catholic priest in Fernie, and we share families in common at our local care home that quite often take us for husband and wife, and we just roll with it because it's easier that way. I did not come out to my congregation. I identify as queer, and I was having a conversation with a local reporter about the Anglican Church having a conversation about changing the marriage canon. And I said, you know, as a queer priest, and just continued talking, didn't even think about it. And that was the headline of the weekly paper. Gay priest defies norms. And I'm like, wow, okay, now everybody knows. So that was like the easiest coming out because I didn't have to tell the story again and again. It was just one and done. So, yeah.
That's a great story and a pretty intense coming out. Honestly, I feel like I would love it if it could be front page news when I come out. Like, I sort of feel a little hurt that I'm not that important to the Calgary Herald, but whatever. Thank you so much, Andrea. And Jolita, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So my name is Jolita Datus, and I am one of those people who have the name that you cannot find on the Coke bottle or on the keychain. It's just that rare. I am very much Haitian, very unapologetic about it, very unapologetic about being Black as well. And tonight I find myself as a visitor on Treaty 6 territory of the Cree and Dene and the Côte Sioux and the Saulteaux and Métis Region 3. So that's where I call home right now, and has been home for the past 15 years. During the day, I refer to myself as a social conversation starter. So I am in Central Alberta, and I have, for my day job, have conversations about race and racism and diversity and equity and all of those things at different spaces. But I like to think of my full-time job as being an auntie. I am an auntie to 5 nephews and 1 niece. And to me, that's the greatest title ever. And I always try to put that in my bio as much as I can. And one thing that I'm proud of myself, I think the biggest moment of pride came for me when I started telling people how to pronounce my name properly. So for many years, many years since I started school, people would just call me whatever. And I didn't at that time have the ability to say, my name is Jolita Datus. And now I not only tell people what my name is, but I also say it in my local language. I don't anglify my name anymore. Because my name is so precious to me and to my parents who gave me my name and my grandparents. And so I think that's my proud moment. Just telling people to say my name correctly and watching sometimes people squirm as they try to say it. But I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna let you continue to try. So that's my proud moment. And but other than that, I'm a social justice activist, and I co-founded, along with my friend and sister, Sadia Khan, we created Ubuntu Mobilizing Central Alberta. And so we are the people who start conversations in Central Alberta.
That you do, and we're so grateful. Thanks, Julita. Proud auntie vibes forever. And honestly, it's such a gift when you let people squirm and try and screw up and try again to pronounce your name. You are giving a great gift in that. Jamie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jamie ARPIN-RICCI. I am joining you from the traditional lands of the Dakota, Cree, Ojibwe, Métis Nations, colonially known as Winnipeg or Winterpeg at this time of year, with our 25 feet of snow everywhere. I use he, him pronouns. I identify as bisexual, pansexual, or queer, depending on the context. I work as a pastoral leader at a little Mennonite community called Little Flowers Community. I am an author and an activist, focusing most of my energy at working to reduce religious-based harm to LGBTQIA and people. And that is because I spent more than 25 years working full-time in a charismatic evangelical Christian organization, trying to affect change from within, which largely got ignored until the Pulse shootings in Orlando, when I became very public about my affirming position and challenging Christian responses, at which point the death threats began. And my wife and I were both invited to leave the organization after 25 years. And so we're kind of in a rebuilding stage, because that happened right as the pandemic started. Great timing for a career change. But it is also something that I'm very proud of, that we did not allow financial stability to be a dictator of our advocacy for people who were subject to injustice. Something I'm particularly proud of beyond my kids, which is so cliche, but they are amazing, is the years of friendship that I've built with men on death row in the United States, and particularly with a young man who is coming up on the 10-year anniversary of his execution by the state of Mississippi. And with his input and his family's input, I wrote a book called The Last Verdict, which is a call for people to consider the complexity and humanity of death row inmates. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Jamie. Wow, I feel like there in that introduction, there's fodder for 100 very rich follow-up conversations that I very much want to have, as I do with all of you. But without further ado, a furry friend. I love to see people's pets on camera, so if you can make that happen, I invite you to do so. But without further ado, let's hop into the meat of things. And before we get started, I should say we are hoping to leave a little bit of time at the end to take some questions from the audience. So if you have a burning question, please do feel free to pop that in the chat, and Pam will be keeping an eye out for those and flagging them for us. And And if you feel like making noise in the chat at anything anyone says, please do that as well, or let us know what your favorite kind of pie is. It's always nice to see people chit-chatting on the side. Maybe we'll go in reverse order this time and start with Jamie. So this year's theme to Pi Day is Everyone Gets a Slice in the LGBTQIA+ and Two-Spirit acronym. Some letters are more or less represented than others. Based on your own personal experience, what do you think often gets missed? I'll turn it over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, I love this question, and I think the thing that gets missed from my perspective, because it's where a lot of my work is the bisexual umbrella community. I'm going to mute myself 1 second. I have a whining dog that needs to escape.
This is the kind of human moment that when it happens on Zoom feels really magical. 0 apologies required.
Thanks. He heard the family come home, and I'm literally at the bottom of the pecking order for the dog's love. So, but I think when I thought about the and I don't want to take the pie analogy too far, but I think when I thought about, everyone gets a slice, I started thinking about how, in order to share it more equitably, the pie more equitably, it does mean that some pieces need to get smaller so that others get larger. And, sometimes we want to be inclusive without sacrifice. We want to affect change as long as it doesn't hurt us where we live. And I think what this theme does is it invites us to consider, how are we willing to divvy up the pie, so to speak, in ways that are more inclusive. And my experience as a bisexual man has meant that I've often experienced my presence in both queer and straight spaces to be negatively impacted. While my identity gets lip service, it often is erased or diminished or denied. I actually had one experience where I was the keynote speaker at a LGBTQIA+ event, and I came down from the stage and a gentleman approached me, and he had a shirt that had the literal letters LGBTQIA on his shirt. And then he proceeded to tell me that bisexuality wasn't a real thing, that I just need to, commit. And I felt like getting out a marker and go, well, let me fix your shirt for you and cross out that B you're so proudly displaying there. But that's the area where I feel most passionately driven to see greater representation, better representation, both in quantity and quality.
Yeah, that's absolutely bang on. I think that's a great use of the pie, the visual metaphor. Just because your slice is getting smaller doesn't mean you're not getting a slice. It means that you are making room for someone who's still hungry. Wonderful. Jolita, I'll pass it on to you in reverse order.
Sure. No matter how long you've been on Zoom, you always forget to mute and unmute. I think I love the theme of everyone gets a slice, because it's reminding us to share, like it's not our pie, it's the universe's pie, and to make sure that everyone gets a slice. And as for people who I feel gets left out, I think sometimes they are those who don't fit with the acronyms, right? And people who are just people, and that it's a spectrum and you can be whatever you want, because I know that at times sometimes we're so strict on how people identify, and you can only identify this way, and not leave room for people to grow, to change, to change their perspectives on things, right? And to be exactly who they are at the moment. So, and I've had a friend who has changed their gender, and asked, hey, it's he, her, and it's she and they, and now they're comfortable, because it's a journey for a lot of people, and to find language as well. And I think sometimes we don't often make space for those people that just like not Chris was saying, but Jamie was saying, pick one, without allowing people to be themselves. And there are people that this is who they are, right? And allowing them to be their full selves. And so I think those people often get misrepresented and get left out. Like we're so strict on pick one. And then the other side too is I think oftentimes along with identities, we sometimes forget people's cultural identities, people's languages as well, and other factors, the intersectionality of all of this, right? And I think that sometimes we don't allow people to present themselves in whichever way they feel best. And so as Haitians, we don't have language for a lot of the words or a lot of the acronyms, right? We just know who we are in our language. And you will often find people who's like, no, you have to say this, or you have to say this. And it's like, nah, we're good with my divinez, we're good with this, right? Whatever that term is for them. And sometimes it's an expression more than a specific label even. And so I, even with myself, I have to remind myself that just because I speak English, English doesn't have to be the definite language for pride or for queer people, with acronyms too, and just allowing people to be who they are whenever they want to be and wherever they want to be their full and true selves.
Oh yeah. No, I think that's so well said. That allowing people to be the fullness and the complexity of what it is to be human is allowing them to change and grow and be multiple different people in a lifespan. Yeah, I think that's really wonderfully said. And I need a shirt that says the universe is pie, I feel like. Andrea, over to you.
Well, first of all, my favorite pie is all of them. It's like trying to choose amongst your children. I can't do it. So favorite pie is all of them. Working in a religious, and I use that term very loosely because the way that many people in society view a religious person is not who I am. And so when they say I don't like religious people, I'm like, I'm with you. And they go, huh? I get shoehorned a lot. I get shoehorned as a minister of God. I get shoehorned as a woman that looks like this, plus size, shaves her head, etc. Yes, Pam, labels should be liberating and self-defined, not imposed. And I think that labels should be self-assigned. I don't think that anyone has the right to come up and go, you're this. And I've had people in my congregation, and I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say that this was said with loving kindness. Are you going to pick a side? To me, well, you've been married to a man, so how can you be queer? And I'm like, that's how I identify. It says queer. Well, it's a derogatory term, isn't it? I said, only if you let it be. And it's having this conversation over and over and being patient, and then coming home and yelling and startling the cat and that sort of thing. But something that happened, I'm with two denominations in the small community of Fernie where I live, where our population is about 5,000 people. And the two churches that I represent both have marriage equality. And when we were having these conversations, it was same gender this or same sex this, or what are we supposed to call it? And I said, can we just call it marriage, please? And so I say marriage equality. And I said, and of course we had to vote for these things. And having a conversation with folks, it was, you need to think about what is in your heart, what is in your head. And so there's a gentleman in my congregation who was raised Orthodox, and he married a Lutheran, and both their families boycotted the wedding because they were just not in favor and had very definite definitions of how this should go. And he said to me, my heart tells me one thing, the way that I was trained in scripture, but I listen to you and my heart says that's the way it's supposed to be. I said, you need to make this decision for yourself. I can't make it for you. It's not appropriate for me to make it for you. You know where I stand, but it's entirely up to you. So it was a secret ballot vote, and he came up to me afterwards, and even the day before, he didn't know how he was going to vote. And it passed unanimously, which I was absolutely gobsmacked that it passed unanimously. And he came up to me afterwards and he says, well, I guess you figured out. And I'm like, well, because everybody did. And he said, it just came that it's more important how people are treated and what's in my heart than what's in my head. And that's how I walk that. And I thought that was so true, that rather than assigning a label, let's just be authentic, whatever that means. And if it means that you're trans, if it means that you're bi, if it means that you're lesbian or gay or two-spirit or all of that sort of stuff. Like, sexuality has been around longer than sexuality has been defined. And the fact that we get all worked up about, have to put it in these labels, and these white colonial folks like my forefathers that are running around saying, well, you don't fit into this mold, so we're going to put you over here. You don't fit into that mold, so we're going to put you over there. And so I push back against the labels. And as much as it's important to have the acronym, I think it's more important to encourage people to be authentic. And during our Pride Festival in October, I was asked to come and speak to a group of guides, and I was really excited. So I, show up and I said, so any questions? And they had just learned about two-spirit. So we had a wonderful conversation about that. And we went around the room, and they were telling me names and whatnot. And so I turned to a person and said, yes, ma'am. And she said, oh, could we do a quick pronoun check? And they identified as non-binary. And I was really impressed, because they would have been 13 or 14 years old. And I was so impressed at the grace in which they introduced this, because they could have made a really big deal out of it, and they didn't. They just said, can we do a pronoun check? And so I started and went around, and everyone said their pronouns. And then I apologized, and they said, oh, it's okay. It happens all the time. It's my pronouns change. They can be they can be she, they can be he. It's just today, my pronouns are they, them. Excellent. And understanding that it's fluid, that it's this idea that we're born this way, we're going to be this way, we're going to die this way. We all change through the course of our life. We learn how to walk, we learn how to use a spoon, we learn how to use the computer. Now we have these generations that are born with the computer in their hand, which is fabulous. But it's the understanding that we're all created in God's image. However it is that you identify, we are all beloved beyond measure. And no matter what somebody says to you, if they try to say that you don't belong to God because of a separation, if someone says, well, I love you, but, then they don't love you. If someone says, God doesn't love you because, then, I mean, they need a punch in the throat is what they need. But, not that I'm inciting violence or anything.
Yes, absolutely. Thank Pam in the chat said labels are like the Bible, can be liberating or alienating depending on how they are used. Absolutely, yes. And a little bit to Jolita's point, specificity is important, language is important as a means of expressing who we are. They're not there to limit our expression of who we are. Yes, that's bang on. Thank you, Andrea. Chris, do you want to take us home for this question?
Yes, sorry if it looks like I'm looking down. It's just that I'm neurodivergent, so if I don't write things down, automatically out of my head. So I've been just writing some notes down while I'm listening. I'm going to echo some of what my panelists said beforehand. Is that we are so in the queer community, we're always like, step outside of the box. You can be whoever you want to be. And then the moment we're in a queer space, it's like, okay, how do you identify? What is it this? How do you, and it's like, I thought we were supposed to be outside of the box. So it's like, it's kind of like, do you remember back in like the 90s going to the doctor's office where you would sit in the waiting room and then they would take you and put you into the smaller waiting room before you actually went to your appointment? I feel like that's how the queer community is sometimes. It's like, I'm in that second waiting room, like the purgatory of waiting rooms, because I'm always like, okay, I can't go to the doctor's office and be done with what I need to do. And I can't go back to the other waiting room because it's going to take me longer. So I just deal with what I deal with. I hope that makes sense to people. But, I just feel like we need to drop labels. Somebody asked me once, I teach youth about 2S LGBTQIA and power and privilege and things. And a child asked me, what is the most important part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus? And I said, it's the plus, because the plus means that you can be anything you want, and everything plus means that you can be even more of what you are already. I've told people that I've went completely through the whole acronym. I went from a straight male to a bisexual male to a drag queen who was bisexual. Then I was a trans woman who was straight. Then I was a trans woman who was bi. And now I identify as a trans woman that is cisgender and also pansexual. So it's like, why do we have to even have those things? I think what is important that we have them for people to identify. I always say representation matters, like my anecdote said before. The problem is we're so focused on that. This is how I explain it to children who, when I'm teaching their about why there's so many acronyms. I just talk about when I was a kid in the 80s, there was a cereal section, and there was like 5 cereals, you know, a lot of flakes, some Rice Krispies, and that horrible puff cereal we have to put 100 pounds of sugar on for it to taste anything. But now when you go to a grocery store, there is a whole aisle of cereals. And that's kind of the way the world is that those ingredients were always here. We just have the technology, we have the abundance, and we have the ways of making it. And that's kind of what the acronym is that we've always had these people here. It's just that now that one. So now it's a broader range, and it's because of our technology that is allowing us to do it. But because we have it, it's a double-edged sword, which means we have so much knowledge now that we're like, okay, now we know too much. So therefore we start losing things that we maybe should. Like, I'm pretty sure most of us don't know how to actually have a physical conversation with someone we just met yesterday in person. Maybe 2.5 years ago, perfectly okay. Now I don't even want to look at my husband in the eye. So that's the problem, is that we have to always keep growing. But the problem is sometimes we go backwards so much because of it. You know, the strong point, people telling Jamie, you know, you can't be bi, or the bi joke of bi people are just greedy and things like that. It's not, you can't be an ally for people. I always say speak up for people, don't speak for people. And I always tell my kids, the people who matter don't care, and the people that care don't matter, which means if they love you for who you are, not for what they can make you. And the acronym sometimes it's so great to allow people who are not part of the community to kind of like identify us, but it's kind of like Duarte said, that they are now saying their name the right way, and they're doing it the right way. We also have to have that acronym there, but we're still kind of doing that whole thing of where we're like, well, you can call me this if you need to call me something, you know? And when it comes to religion and things like that, it's all encompassing, because we're told, you know, for certain religions, I was born Roman Catholic, like I said, the ladies auxiliary and things like that. And right from the start, it's like, no, 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 no. And then I go to a United Church with my other grandmother, and they're like, yeah, you can be whatever you want. And I'm like, well, what are they talking about down the street? Do y'all have the same kind of Bible, but you're not, I don't understand. So it's just that's the problem. We have too much knowledge now that we're starting to forget what we used to know. And I think sometimes we have to let people just be people, especially when we're talking about the queer community, because we have so many people that are willing to attack us from outside. We don't need it from within.
Oh man, I'm glad I was off. I was muted for that, Chris, because you were making me laugh. Thank you, everyone. I really like the metaphor of the cereal aisle. I feel like that's a really rich and useful metaphor that I'm absolutely going to steal after tonight. So thank you. Maybe for our next question, we will start smack in the middle. So Julieta, if you want to be on first on deck for this. So building on that last question, what is one thing that you feel we could all do to help remedy the things that get missed in these conversations, so that we're not missing folks out, both as individuals and as faith communities? Julieta, take it away.
Sure. I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned from my mom is she said, don't empower people, give people their own power. Because oftentimes we're the ones who want to speak for people, right? Like we want to empower young people. We want to empower trans people. We want to empower queer people. But if we were to take that away and instead give them the power to state and to say and to make their own demands and to tell their own stories, that would be the best remedy. Because oftentimes we ask questions, or we ask people, what would make you happy, or what do you need to thrive? And they start speaking, and then we interrupt and we add our own to it. So we never fully get whatever it was that they were starting to say. And so with me, one of the this little trick that I do is, after, when I'm speaking to someone, even if it's not just a question, if they're speaking, I sing the entire alphabet internally to allow that person to just keep talking as much as they want to, even though I'm listening to them with intention, but just allowing them to actually say whatever they want, to make whatever their demands are, because I'm so quick to make suggestions and to give support, and to tell a story, and so it often takes away from people, and I've done it to people, right? And so to me, I think one of the things that we can do to help people that we feel who are missing out, or people that we leave out sometimes too. Sometimes it's not people missing out, it's we leave them out. We've taken them out. It's to listen with intention, to actually sit and listen, and then to take a deep breath and just say, okay, I can do that, instead of coming up with our own ideas and our own solutions for what we think they need. Because oftentimes they literally don't need us to be a savior to them. They just need us to leave them alone, support them in what they're asking for, but to give them space to be their own, I don't want to say to be their own saviors, but to just be their own selves and to advocate on their own. And so to me, I'm learning slowly to move away from predicting what people want, to suggesting and doing on behalf of other people, and just literally move to the side and say, okay, here's the spotlight. This is yours. Tell me what you want, or tell us what you want. And that allows me to sit back and be humble for a bit as well. And I'm still learning that. I haven't quite gotten it yet. I'm really quick to be like, nope, you need this, but I'm learning. The more I listen, the more I'm finding that I'm learning. And I think that will help to remedy some of that, if not all, but just some of that, just the intentional listening.
I love the practicality of practicing giving people space to finish their thought by reciting the alphabet. That is so specific. I love it. Jamie, I'll pass it over to you next.
Oh, I'm just enjoying listening. I'm learning so much from the fellow panelists. Building on the last question, I think a big thing that can be done is, how do I put it? So for myself, when I talk about being bisexual and I use those labels of, bisexual or pansexual or queer, I don't hold those as kind of essentialist, definitive, fixed identity points. I tell people it's not what I am, and it's not even really who I am. It's more accurately put, it's where I am. So it's like a GPS. Someone's like, where are you? Well, here's where you can understand my context. And that I'm going to move on that map. So my place in that map is going to move. And so understanding gender and sexual orientation in that more fluid sense is helpful. And the language of bisexuality and pansexuality and queerness is helpful for me where I'm at, and it's helpful to communicate in proximity where other people is at. So what can people do, especially as faith communities? Well, in faith communities where people who are cisgender and straight and wanting to practice allyship, is to recognize that straightness is just as much a construct that is not essential and fixed and absolute. And so much of straightness within Western Christianity especially is just accepted uncritically. And again, being in an evangelical context, queerness was examined to the nth degree constantly, but I never noticed anyone really critically examine straightness or cisgender identity. And so my challenge is often to the communities is one of the ways you can help and be of support to LGBTQIA communities is to recognize that your own identity needs to be examined, critically examined, and the phrase I use is often, you need to interrogate your own straightness or interrogate your own cisgenderness. And until you do that, there'll always be this otherness where people who are not straight are required to do all this work of defining and explaining, but the dominant presumed norm isn't required to do any of that work. And I think regardless of where you end through that examination, I think we will all discover that a significant amount of our understanding of straightness, of gender, of even monogamy in relationships is bound up into some really toxic historical power structures that even if you get to the other side and generally hold the same identity and sexual ethic, that's fine. But you do so by unraveling those toxic threads and understanding yourself more complexly. And when you can see your own identity as complex, you can then understand the complexity and nuance of other people's identity. People often ask, how many more letters are we going to have to add to this alphabet? And it's like, as many as are necessary until you stop making one group the other and the other the norm.
Yeah, again, I really love the specificity and the concreteness of that. The work of being more inclusive is recognizing, unpacking your own lens and recognizing that you are not the default and that the norm. That's really wonderful. Chris, I'll send it over to you.
I'm going to kind of jump off of what Jamie said. When I started my transition, I was, always asked sarcastically, when did you decide to, become a woman? Or when did you decide? And I would always ask, so when did you decide to become straight? And they would look at me like, what do you mean? I just knew. And I was like, okay, so what made you believe that you were straight? Well, I just am. And I'm like, well, you can't ask me the same thing and then not be able to answer your own question. So that's one of the things. And also who you surround yourself with, I think, is another thing. People always ask me, how can we be more inclusive? How can we be more with QT BIPOC people, queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, people of color? And I'm always like, so have you reached out to this person? Have you done this work with this person? Have you went to any of their events? Have you spoken to these people? Well, no. Okay, well, don't be coming to me as your Black friend and expecting me to also then go out into the community and thusly, I'm not a door-to-door salesman. And I think that's probably sometimes what it is that we feel that because we know people that are in the community, we get them to educate us as opposed to us having ourselves to go out and educate the things that we might not know. And sometimes we need to educate ourselves without even thinking about it. Like if you're waiting for something to tell you to do it, then you're not proactively living your life. And someone like me, I'm a racialized person, so I'm a Black person. So I come from like triple minority, I'm Black, I'm trans, and I'm also a mixed race woman, which is another thing. So the problem is especially in the racialized communities, it's very harsh for trans people. It's very harsh for people that are in the queer community because, we already are racialized. So, we already have things against us in the world. So why would you choose to be in a community that's, again, putting yourself in another, crosshairs? So, we're told right from the beginning, this is how you're supposed to be. You can't be this, you can't be this, you can't be this, to the point where people are unaliving themselves, leaving themselves, and not being able to deal with it anymore. Me being racialized and trans, like I'm on the totem pole. Yes, even the queer community, we have our hierarchy. Cis white men are, still at the high in the queer community, and unfortunately in some other organizations as well. And the reason is because the average rate of death for a trans woman is 34. That is our average light. Last year, there was 375 trans people killed in North America, 90% of them being women of color. And the fact is, why I'm stating that is because when people come to me and they're like, well, you're on TV, you're doing everything, you have trans people winning Oscars and things like that. These guys are doing perfectly. And I'm like, do you know that 375, that's literally a person a day, a trans person a day last year was killed. And we're still told, well, I don't know why you're killing yourselves. And it's like, because you're telling us that we do not belong. And we have in United States right now, we have literally 3 laws in effect to make sure that trans people are persecuted and wiped out. So I think what needs to happen is make sure that people are educating themselves, because you don't know until you don't know. And kind of like what she said is that I also want to always do that. I'm autistic, so I don't really get social cues sometimes. And I've kind of made myself believe that, and I've uncolonized myself over the last 2.5 years to be unapologetically telling people this is why we need to do what we need to do, because it's not enough to call yourself an ally unless you're going to do the work and know the struggle that you're helping. Speak up for people, never speak for them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think those are all really great points. And part of why it's so important to the continued marking of TDOR, of the Trans Day of Remembrance, because that death toll is so staggeringly high, it's so important to name those folks whose lives were lost and remember that in the midst of the day-to-day, how that's unacceptable. Andrea, I believe you are taking us home on this one.
Coming at it from that religious perspective, I get a lot of folks that say, why do we still have to talk about this? I mean, why do we have so many letters in this? And then they get the 7 verses from the New Testament that are used as the bashing verses, and why homosexuality is a sin and whatnot. I'm like, you want to play Levitical wars? Let's play Levitical wars. And it irritates me. And when people see me dressed and out in the community, they're looking at me like, well, aren't you supposed to be a religious person? And I say, yes, I am who God made me, and God made me a religious person, if you will. But it's important that my Nana used to tell me all the time that God made you with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them accordingly. So listen twice as much as you speak. And I don't always succeed in that, but I try. And when I have people that come up and say derogatory and hurtful things, I was raised first and foremost to be a good girl and to be a nice girl. And now I'm 54, menopausal, and really at the point where I'm over it. So if somebody comes up and they say something hurtful, I'll say, I'm glad you said that to me, because if you'd said that to someone else, they might really be hurt. Well, how long have you known that you were queer? Well, how long have you known that you were straight? Exactly what Chris does. Exactly like my sister, exactly the same. When someone says, well, how do you know? Or I had someone that said to me, well, I'm absolutely okay with your sexuality. And I was on the verge of saying, oh, thank you so much for approving of me. But before I had a chance to say that, she said, well, I'm okay with your sexuality, but you're not like attracted to me. And I'm like, not even a little bit, but thanks. Like that idea that if you are part of this spectrum, that we're just, we just want to get our hands on absolutely everybody. And that is not it, not it. Trying to deconstruct the idea of gender in the Bible. God doesn't have a gender. The reason why God is gendered in the Bible is because of the straight, white, cisgendered men that decided they were going to insert where it was not originally. And so I don't refer to God as a gender. God has no gender. in my world. Jesus, we can say, is male, and the Holy Spirit thus is female. And it's freaked some of my folks out because I just unapologetically go in and say, this is how it is. And it's been really funny over the last 4 years of hearing people adopt that language, talking about Pentecost and the coming of the Spirit. And, oh, well, what time did she arrive? And it's this joke, like, what time did she get here? And it's wonderful to see in modeling, this is appropriate language, this is appropriate behavior. Question absolutely everything. Don't take my word for something. That this book was written not to be used as a textbook, but to be used as a wonderful book filled with stories and lessons. Is it to be taken literally? Oh, I certainly hope not. And so having some conversations with folks that take the Bible as the inerrant word of God scares me, because I know that what's most important to them is being right. It doesn't matter if they destroy the relationship. What's most important to me is maintaining the relationship. And there have been people that I've had to walk away from and say, you are a harmful person to me. I don't feel good when I finish talking to you. So I'm going to lovingly let you go. And I don't say this next bit, because if you stay around me very much longer, I'm going to smack you in the face. And it's the one thing in my life that I have no use for is hatred. And I will intentionally read blogs and listen to podcasts with theologians that I disagree with, just so I can hear another perspective and make sure I don't get the tunnel vision. But this idea that that God made us straight, or God made us this, or, you know, if you're outside of heterosexuality, there's something wrong with you. And it's taking that back to the sociological times and saying, well, actually, heterosexuality is pretty new, and pushing back on and challenging, most of the time lovingly, but saying there is more than one way to look at it. And we are all created unique and beautiful and wonderful, and we all deserve to live in our authentic, truest self.
Wonderfully said. Thank you all. I really like this next question. Can you think of an aha moment where you learned how to more actively include others or other identities and perspectives in your worldview? What helped you? And maybe I'll ask Chris to kick it off for us.
I guess my Oprah moment for me was as a racialized, queer, trans, ex-Navy, drag queen, makeup artist, esthetician, never a sleeping person. When I realized that I don't have to be just one thing, I think it was I used my interconnectionality to be able to meld it together so that I could, do certain things. I'm a drag queen, but I'm also, because of the drag, it has made me, popular within the queer community as a voice to speak. And then people see me perform, and then they'll come and see me speak, and they're like, wow, I didn't realize you were so well spoken, or you're so, things like that. A little bit a little aggressive when some people say that when I'm well spoken. But anyways, so when I learned to use all of that and just put it together where I didn't have to just be one thing, kind of goes back to that LGBTQIA 2S, acronym, is that I didn't have to just be one thing. I could be cereal, I could be oat flakes, I could be whatever I wanted to be. So using all of that, and then making it, unfortunately, not unfortunately, I stopped apologizing for this, was told by my husband I have to stop apologizing for it. Making people pay for it. I think that was one of the biggest things. I used to be like, oh, I know you have to do this and stuff like that. But now my motto is know your worth and add tax. So I think what it was is be able to take everything that I've been doing over the last few years and know where to use it, because I'm an esthetician. I teach trans women how to take care of their skin and what to go through for their, when they're doing their hormones. And because of me being an actress, I've been able to do public speaking and things like that. And because of my performance, it's given me kind of like a hide in plain sight where I was able to transition with anything. So taking all of that together and being able to make it into something that I can make it my life. That way I continue to live my life authentically. It's just that now I'm getting paid to do it. So that's I think that was my biggest aha moment, was like, you're worth it. We get this thing called imposter syndrome where we believe that, just because I don't have the right degrees, or I don't have the right, names or the right things at the end of my name, I'm not worth it. But lived experience, I think, is one of the biggest things. I kind of attribute it. I'm from Cape Breton, so I'm from a small town. I attribute it to the mechanic of the world. That's what I feel like I am. You go to the mechanic, not the one who went to school 2 years ago and knows the newfangled computers. You go to the mechanic that knows how to take a car apart and put it together, but has no idea what the name is. That's the mechanic you go to. And that's what I kind of want to be for the world. Is I want you to come to me, because even though I didn't go to school, I'm probably going to tell you the cheat codes and how to get everything the right way. So I think that's what it was, just built to bring it together and do what I love.
That's another really delightful metaphor that I am ready to steal after this event. Julita, is it okay if I pass it over to you next?
For sure. I think my aha moment was my nephew. I learned so much from all of them. And when you're in the presence of little people, smaller people, they demand your attention. And so for me, in learning how to actively include people, their identities, their perspectives, I learned that from the little ones in my life. Because if they want to serve you rock sandwiches when you're at the park, and you have to sit right there and allow them to serve you this, and and you pay them in rocks, and you have these sandwiches and stuff, you have to be intentional and being in the moment. And everything that they say, you're like, yep, yes, I would love a milkshake. Yes, I would like tomatoes and my, ice cream or whatever it is. And it's not because you're humoring them, but it's because there's so much love, there's so much care that you are willing to sit and allow them once again to tell you whatever story it is that they're telling you. And you are so engaged with them. You're not trying to change their minds about anything. You just go with the flow, right? And if they say that the sky is purple, you're like, yeah, it's a beautiful purple, right? Like you're just so engaged with them. And so to me, it has helped me listening to other people, even if I don't understand what they're saying, that I'm actively engaged with them, which is hard to do. But when you're around little children, you have no choice but to listen to whatever stories that they're telling you. The other aha moment is coloring. Again, I am not that person I'm not an artist. So to be able to get me to sit for like 2 minutes or 3 minutes and to color something, it takes a lot. But again, with little ones, with 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and they're coloring and you're watching how they color, it shows that sometimes in order to, sometimes in including other people, it just means spending time with them. You don't have to do all the heavy lifting all of the time. You don't have to, it's not all about, the big events, but sometimes people just want you to sit next to them and share in the good moments, share in the little moments of joy, and just color with them. And so to me, sometimes I've learned in my work, which is heavy work, that sometimes I need to stop and ask people, what can we do? What can we do to have fun? What can we do to celebrate? Because it's such heavy work, especially when you're dealing with racism and discrimination and prejudice and biases. Sometimes people just want you to ask them about the good things too. Do you want to get a lemonade? What do you want in your lemonade? And that's it. Like, so for 5 minutes, we're just sipping on lemonade. And it occurred to me just yesterday, I had a community person come into our office, and I was on the phone dealing with something else, and there were crayons, because crayons are now my go-to thing on our welcome table at the office. And he sat down and he drew this beautiful, absolutely beautiful piece of art with just the little 4 crayons that we had on the table. And that's all he wanted. And then he got up and he left, because he just wanted that moment to just be himself, to do whatever it was that it took. And I now framed it, and I told him when he becomes this multi-millionaire artist, I'm going to say I had the first one. So to me, my aha moment is just allowing people to celebrate in the little wins as well, and just to bask in the small moments, and to play ice cream shop, and to play grocery store with those people, because sometimes that's all that it takes to really build them up. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's how I've been feeling lately.
No, I think that those are lovely aha moments and very practical advice. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes the most loving thing you can do for me is like me and enjoy my company, and not just love me in God's way. Sometimes I just want you to color and eat rock sandwiches with me. We're not always doing the work. Well, maybe some of you are who never need to sleep. But,
Yeah, my neighbors make the best rock sandwiches and rock ice creams too.
Delicious. Andrea, can I toss it over to you next? And before I do, I'll maybe just throw it to the chat. We're coming close-ish to time, so if you have burning questions, please do put them in the chat, and we will jump over to those next. Andrea, take it away.
Thank you. Authenticity is having an aha moment, because I'm really good at dispensing advice to other people. I'm really good at helping folks that are in crisis and letting them know that they are loved unconditionally. But seldom do I extend myself the same grace. And came to a realization in the summertime. I'd been traveling for 2 weeks. It was the first time I'd ever taken 3 weeks of vacation in a row. Had been traveling for 2 weeks, was back in the community, back in the province, and I got a call from the funeral director that a 12-year-old boy had died tragically. Could I walk with the family? And of course, the only answer to that is yes. So went and spent some time with the funeral director to get the information of what was happening, and then met with this young boy's parents. And they keep looking at me pleadingly. And I said, I don't have a magic formula. I don't have a magic wand. I don't have a speech that I can say, this is how to make it better. All I can do is be here with you, because that's all I know how to do in this moment. And listened, and the dad was absolutely devastated, as I having not birthed children, I cannot imagine the grief that that father was going through. And it was the last day that his son was at the grandparents, and they were going to be driving in to pick him up. And then they got a phone call. I don't know how you make that phone call. I cannot even imagine. And so we met outside, and the young one that died had a six-year-old sister who was running around chasing the ducks, having a great old time. And so we were watching her collect duck feathers, and I was told that she didn't take them from the ducks, that they were on the ground, because I had visions of this little one running up going, I want that feather, but she didn't. She picked them up from the ground. And it was simply being there for the ordinary things and that sort of stuff. And it was learning that the education that I have does not prepare you for moments like this, that all of the reading in the world does not prepare you for walking with someone that has endured so much grief. And so the best piece of advice I give to people who want to support someone who is grieving is to sit with them and hold space in that uncomfortable, we want to say something to make it better, and there is nothing to say to make it better. We want to do something, but there isn't anything logically that we can do. And so the most authentic thing that we can do is offer ourselves and say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here. And if it means that you sit in that uncomfortable silence for a while, then that's what you need to do. If it's, so tell me a story about And so when we had the funeral for this young man, he had a favorite song, and the family put a video together of from birth to the age of 12. And one of the songs that was in this video was a favorite of his little sister, and she started singing along. And then all of the other children that were present started singing along. And it was the most beautiful, unexpected, unscripted moment that this angelic voice started singing this song, and the mood in the room shifted. It became about hope. It became about community, about where we go from here and how we go forward from here. And the realization that more often than not, we are equipped with everything that we need to be in that moment, and that we don't need to depend on ourselves to get it right, that all we need to do is show up, and somehow or other, it gets worked out.
Thank you, Andrea. That's really beautiful. And I think a really poignant lived example of Chris's point about the mechanic. You know, there are some things that you can't learn from a degree. There are some things you only live to learn them. You learn them by doing. Jamie, I will send it over to you.
I think the aha moment where I learned how to actively include others came through my son. I'm the father of a Black son, and when I became his father, I was very acutely aware that not only would I don't know how to raise him to be a Black man, because I could never know what I don't know. And so, I mean, obviously I've done many things like include people in his life that can give him the kind of wisdom that I could never, but I also said, I knew I had to do a lot of work. And so a friend of mine, Indigenous friend of mine said, one thing, you're a reader, Jamie, you need to commit to reading more material from BIPOC authors at a higher degree than you read white authors. And I'm like, okay, that's good. I'll read about anti-racism. I'll read about parenting. And she's like, no, you don't understand me. All of your reading, I don't care if it's fiction for the beach, read authors, prioritize reading BIPOC authors over white authors. And it was this major shift for me, because the shift came where I suddenly realized that I'm not just mining a topic for wisdom that I can take, but there's whole lived experiences that shape imaginations that, again, I can never fully grasp it, but unless I'm willing to immerse myself more fully in it, I will never even get a sense of where I need to go. And it was such a significant shift in my life. And it shouldn't have taken the fact that I had a son to do that, a Black son to do that. It did, and I'm glad, I'm grateful. It shouldn't have taken that. But whenever we're with people who represent a group that is on the margins of power, we need to take ourselves out of our own places of privilege and power and immerse ourselves as much as possible. And that means wholly, not just in segmented, partial approaches. And not only did it transform my way of seeing the world and understanding my own racial identity, but I also discovered some freaking amazing authors that I probably would never have found otherwise. And I'm really grateful for that. So.
Thank you, Tammy. I think that's really beautifully put. Thank you all. Pam, I want you to feel free to interrupt me if you want to jump in with a question from the audience, but I think we have time probably for one more question that I have before we let you all go back to your lives. And maybe starting with Andrea this time. Can you share with me a time when you felt affirmed in your identity or included in a way that wasn't performative or tokenizing? If you have an example ready.
I was asked 3 or 4 years ago if I would be on the board for the Fernie Pride Society, and I was quite excited to be asked. There we go. I was excited to be asked, but at the same time, I'm like, but why me? And they said, well, we'd really love to have you because folks know you in the community and you're really bubbly and outgoing. And I'm like, okay. And you're a religious person, so we'd like you to bring that, faith perspective in. And I said, okay. So I joined the board, and it's been so neat to sit around the table with folks that are part of the, what was that phrase, alphabet mafia, that were part of this alphabet mafia. And they will come up and they'll want to have a conversation about faith and some horrific stories about being hurt by the church. Some of the stories that echo Jamie's experience, which no one should have to be told that they're less than, ever. And being able to talk to them and they say, you're not like any clergy person that I've met before. And I always take that as a very large compliment. And being able to be there in a side that I don't often show, just to, with all of the labels that society assigns and the ones that I choose to hold on to and the ones that I choose to reject, to be in that space, not because of one thing, but to be there because of the wholeness of who I am, was pretty awesome. And it continues to be pretty amazing.
What a cool example. Thank you. Chris, can I send it over to you next?
I will be honest. I was listening to Andrea's speech and I completely forgot the question because I was literally so intensely listening to them.
I'm happy to repeat it. That's honestly a best case scenario if we're all just so listening to each other so intently.
I've been up since 7 o'clock and it's almost 11 o'clock here. So yeah.
Can you share a time when you felt affirmed in your identity or included in a way that wasn't performative or tokenizing? And if you would prefer that I go to someone else to give you time to think, that's also fine.
It was there's a few of them. I'm trying to think of the top one. I would say when I was the Pride Ambassador of Halifax, but I think that was kind of still tokenizing a little bit. But I think getting my job that I have now, so many people have told me, if you're going to have to go back to school, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that if you want to do anything like this. But then when I applied to work at the youth project, I'm almost 40 years old. So, I was like, okay, maybe they're just gonna be like, okay, that's great. That old trans elder wants to come work with us. And maybe I said, I don't think I'm going to be young enough to work with youth, because it's from ages 12 to 25. And I was recently told that during the interview process, when they finally picked who I was, they told them before they told me, and they were like, oh my God, we're so happy that she's coming. I can't believe, and stuff like that. And I think what it was for me was saying, hey, you need to stop second guessing yourself, and you need to start realizing that you are what you're doing and you're doing it well. So I think for me was being able to, when I always said was, again, I do everything for that Christopher William Cochrane, so there's not somebody else that's ever thinking of that. And now I'm directly doing that, what I've always wanted to do. And not only that, I'm recognized by peers and other people for what I do to the point where I am now. So I think that's what it was for me. It was the finding out that I am enough, and being able to tell other kids that, guess what, there is enough. I like to say I'm middle management. We're always thinking about the trans community as when we're winning Oscars or we're passing away. I like to say I'm middle management trans woman. I'm not really at the Oscar stage yet, and hopefully I won't be passing away for a very long time. So I like being the middle management that's allowing our future to be a lot more trans inclusive. Just a little anecdote, sorry, I'm a bit bad for these. I'm watching RuPaul's Drag Race this year, and in the course of 2 months, we've had 4 trans women come out on the TV show. So it's things like that I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe we are taking over, maybe we are everywhere. But I'm happy that we're finally not having to hide who we are. So that's what it was for me.
That's wonderful. And Yeah, I mean, is there anything more amazing as a young queer person to see versions of your future in the queer elders around you that aren't just Oscars and dying, but seeing people living their lives, whatever that looks like. I think that's really beautifully put. Jamie, we'll send it over to you.
A lot of people who fall under the bi plus umbrella, especially those of us who happen to be in straight presenting relationships, often struggle with this feeling of not being queer enough. That whole queer enough lie kind of creeps in there, and that's something, you know, that's a part of the whole imposter syndrome that we were talking about earlier, and it's something that, you know, even though I've been out for I think around 30 years, I still struggle with. And then a couple of years ago, a friend and colleague, we were in a meeting with other queer leaders of faith, and she just was talking about queer eldership, and she named me as a queer elder she respected. And it just like I we're sitting in this meeting where I like bawled. I just started bawling my head off, because it was not only was my queerness immediately validated, but I was seen as someone who carried a legacy that she respected, and that to me was it was a turning point in my embracing that I have something to give, that I have something of value, and that I don't have to question whether I'm queer enough.
Gorgeous. That's so lovely. Thank you. And Jalita, I believe you're taking us home on this final question.
Sure. I don't know if I'm there yet. And it's difficult. It's difficult to even say that, because I feel as if sometimes people tokenize different parts of me. So I remember when the earthquake happened in Haiti in 2010, right? I was that Haitian friend. Like everyone was like, oh, yeah, there's that Haitian girl, right? And then in 2020, it was like, oh, she's Black. You're that Black girl. And with my different identities, I feel like they don't quite know what to do with it, even though it's not their place to have to do anything with it, but that I can't just be myself, right? And I think Chris alluded to this too, where people still say, you're so articulate, you speak so well. Like they're almost surprised that I'm able to contribute to conversation. And I do recognize that they don't see as many Black women in spaces, right? Or who would challenge or who will push back a bit. And so it's like this pat on the back, which makes me feel gross a lot of the times, because all they see at times is the pushback, and not the other parts of me that just wants to have fun. And that's because, and I've said this before, like people don't invite me to things where I just get to celebrate like this, right? Just to celebrate who I am in all the various parts of me. But it's usually come and talk about this, come and talk about this, come and talk about this. But it's not necessarily the joyful moments or the moments of celebration. And I always say that, like, Black women, we don't often get invited to the brunch to just be who we are on a Sunday morning. We're usually invited to do a lot of heavy lifting, to bring that warrior spirit, to be, you know, anything other than just in our full Blackness and glory. People expect me to sing. I don't sing. That's the one thing I don't do. And so they'll be like, oh, you're Black, right? Like you can sing, like you should be able to. And I'm like, no. And so I struggle with that. So oftentimes, especially when I'm on a panel where there's another Black woman, I'm like, okay, yep, this is my moment. I can just sit back and be me. I don't have to be that Black person on the panel. And that's why it's so important for us not to be tokenized, where there's not just one Black person, there's not just one woman, there's not just one trans person, there's not just one queer person, but that there's enough of us that sometimes we're able to just be the other parts of us. And so I'm still on that journey of being affirmed just for being Julta. And hopefully it comes someday soon. And it's starting with this space. And so Chris, I'm just like amazed that you're here. And thank you to for creating this space, right, where I don't feel that I have to be anything other than this, and to share my full stories.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, that is completely valid. And sharing these stories doesn't always feel good. It doesn't have to. And maybe it's better if we all get better at sitting with discomfort sometimes. So thank you so much for that perspective. Well, I am so grateful for all of you for joining us and generously sharing your time and expertise. And I'm grateful to all of you who attended. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to Affirm United for hosting this with us and helping do the legwork of making this happen. And without further ado, thank you to all of our panelists, super geniuses, for being here. And have a wonderful evening, everyone.